Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining this month's Fireside Chat, also co-hosted with One Parallel Collective. My name is Keroles Riad, and I lead the Waste Not, Want Not initiative at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. Today, I have the privilege to chat with Kasha Sequoia Slavner and Ian Speirs. Before I introduce Kasha and Ian, I would like to highlight two goals of these fireside chats. The first goal is to better connect our different communities. So we have all put our full names and encourage you to add us on LinkedIn. The second goal of these fireside chats is to learn from one another. So Brittany, who is hiding in the background now, will join us towards the end and moderate an audience Q&A. So please write your questions in the comments and by all means talk to one another. I also encourage you to think about this question as you listen to our chat. What does being a global citizen mean to you? I invite you to share your thoughts on that question with us and with one another in the chat. With that, I am honored to introduce Kasha, who is a Gen Z documentary filmmaker, photographer, and passionate social justice advocate. At age 14, she founded the Global Sunrise Project, a youth-led social enterprise that creates positive impact media. Her first feature documentary, The Sunrise Storyteller, had its world premiere at the UN Commission on the Status of Women in 2017. She's the first recipient of the Kim Phuc Youth Peace Award. Kasha's next documentary, which is called 1.5 Degrees of Peace, will explore how climate action and peace are more interconnected than we may think. I am also honored to introduce Ian Speirs, who is the founder and chief visionary officer of One World Collective, which is grounded in the principles of human dignity and universal responsibility, and has recently organized an event with the Dalai Lama. He's the president of Elite Vision Communication, an artisan event management company. He is presently establishing a parent project to World Collective, which is called Ansatara, a sustainability-focused incubator. As the co-founder of a national NGO in support of Indigenous peoples, he also works directly with over 90 First Nations and Inuit community. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's Fireside Chat is about global citizenship, and as we keep working together to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including fighting the waste and climate crises. A couple of weeks ago, One World Collective organized a live conversation with the Dalai Lama that both Kash and I had the privilege to participate in. So first, thank you, Ian, for this thoughtful invitation and for joining us today. I would like to start today's conversation with a clip from that event with the main message that His Holiness wanted to convey. So I'll play that now.
See you again. And we all, human brothers, sisters, you see, we all have the responsibility to develop happy humanity, peaceful world. So please think. You, each individual, you all have same responsibility and the same potential to make a small contribution. Even you see, you share with your friend, 2 friends, 10 friends, or 20 friends, and then 100 friends. That's the way to do. And pray or effort, you see, change whole world once impossible. You see, we have to work step by step, like that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ian, that was a truly inspirational event. The 90 minutes that we spent with His Holiness the Dalai Lama just flew by, and there were so many important messages. And I am wondering if you can share your biggest takeaway from that event. If people can remember only one thing, what you want that to be.
Yeah, I was reflecting on what my greatest takeaway was, and there were so many amazing things that the Dalai Lama shared, but one in particular that resonated deeply was, seeing ourselves not being different from one another based on our ethnicity or nationality or any of these things, but to see ourselves as one humanity, focusing on what we can do best to help the planet. So, we've been conditioned by governments and by systems to erect barriers, but it's time to change the way we see ourselves and our world, right? It's also every little thing we do for the sake of humanity and the planet and wildlife that will encourage our neighbor to do the same, and then their neighbors. This is how we can transform the world together, each of us doing our little bit together, like a pebble on the water that creates ripples that go around the world, that gives birth to a unified tsunami, basically of love and action. And so I think that's been the heart of One Better World Collective. And I think, His Holiness the Dalai Lama really nailed that in that statement we just saw. So that's my greatest takeaway.
Yeah, he was always talking about the concept of oneness, where we're all humans. It doesn't matter our differences and even our religious beliefs. All of this is personal. At the end of the day, we're all human. Kasha, on Earth Day last week, we screened your documentary as a Sunrise Storyteller, and we had 40 people from across the world. We had, I think, participation from 5 different continents. And I'm sure I speak for all of us that we all got goosebumps and left so energized and so inspired. I would like to play the trailer just for people who couldn't join us for asking a question.
What if I could go visit people making change in their own communities? Show the world that change is possible, no matter where you come from.
We are all done packing. Behind me, I've got my trusty backpack.
Sorry, there's some form of an echo, no? Or just me? Sorry. Okay, I'm going to try one last time and see how it works.
What if I could go visit people making change in their own communities? Show the world that change is possible, no matter where you come from.
We are all done packing. Behind me, I've got my trusty backpack. This is what I'm going to be living out of for the next 6 months, so we'll see how it goes.
Always the big question, how you respond about that problem, how you respond about that circumstances.
And the reason that I first started working with refugees is because of the inspiration that I got from working with them and seeing these people who had no opportunities, who have really worked so hard to be able to make opportunities for themselves.
I have to keep going because there is someone that is following me.
You can have money, you can have everything you want, but happiness is very important. You can't buy happiness.
Beautiful. So, I mean, we live at a time where a lot of people, including myself, struggle with anxiety just because of the sheer scope, magnitude, and urgency of the climate and waste crises. And you talk about that in the documentary and in your TED Talk as well. And to quote you, the weight of the world is displayed on my screen and is on my shoulders. And I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit how you're staying motivated despite that anxiety.
That's a great question because I still struggle with intense anxiety about, in my own life as well as about these crises that we're facing. But as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, the lens that I choose to focus on is the way that we can overcome the adversity that we're faced with and turn it into meaningful action for sustainable change. So through the stories I tell, I like to say that, I'm a positive social impact storyteller. I like to focus on positive stories, but that's not to erase the weight and the scale of the crisis that we're facing, because that would do a serious injustice to everybody who's struggling with the consequences of the climate crisis and other global issues. But to show how they've used what little resources and whatever they have to make a positive impact in their community. And so that's why, I think positive storytelling can be really transformational. And it can move us to take action by seeing the possibilities. So in my own life, I stay motivated to take action because I know that there are stories out there of people, and there are people out there who are trying their best every day to make the world a better place for our generation and for generations to come. Mm-hmm. And I think the only solution to, that anxiety, or the only kind of coping mechanism that we can really have, is to take action on it, because, staying apathetic and, feeling overwhelmed it's okay. And we're allowed to feel those feelings, but we have to take action because there's no choice. So taking action is how we're going to move beyond this crisis. So I think that we have to stay inspired by the people in our communities. And that's why I choose to be a storyteller.
No, I completely agree. I think what I've always thought was that the status quo of the system is maintained when people don't believe the system can change. And I think it's so impactful to demonstrate that the system can change and there are positive things that are happening. And I think this is really the only way to create and drive systemic change. So I completely agree with you there. Ian, we have mentioned One Fair World quite a few times already. And before I ask you to talk a little bit about what it is and some of the work you're doing, I want to play a little video from our friend Marie-Claire Graf from Switzerland, who is also One Fair World liaison, just describing the organization in her own words.
So where we're coming in with a more mindful approach and trying to reassess the current value system. And I think this is really important because there is like a very famous quote from Einstein that you cannot solve the issue, like you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking you were heading into it. And it's exactly the point. Even if you have the most brilliant people all coming together, it's impossible to find the solution in the current way we have been doing business, we have been doing politics, we have been doing education, we have been doing everything. And that's why I think this more mindful, personal approach addressing this crisis is a very good way. And I do hope that we can reach many more people, that they also are doing this inner change and try to find this inner fulfillment. Rather than just like overconsumption. I mean, today is like, I think Cyber Monday or something. I don't really care, but like last Friday was like the Black Friday. I mean, like just trying to fill yourself with like external things instead of like being the lamp and being the light which you carry within. And I think this is so important for all of this, what we are trying to do.
Ian, can you talk a little bit about what One Fair World is?
I'm so inspired when I hear Marie-Claire share the perspective of the importance of mindfulness, and it really is at the core of what One Better World Collective is all about. And I think we're based on advancing the SDGs through a transformational message of love, but mindfulness is kind of at the core of all of that. So I'm always reminded that in all that we do, and there's a lot of stuff going on, if at the heart of who we are, if we're not at peace with who we are, we'll never be able to really transmit the encouragement necessary to help facilitate the other great things that are going on, including the work that Kasha's doing and the upcoming film. And we're trying to think of ways of how we can get more involved in that, by the way, Kasha. So I also wanted to say that, it's humbling and surreal for me personally to see the growth of the organization over well, goodness, Kira, we got together, is it June last year? Or even
Yeah, it was October, November. Yeah, maybe. I think sorry, June, July. Yeah.
And so since then, I mean, you've seen it yourself in terms of where we've gone. Every continent now, over 60 nations, over 140 liaisons now representing, different spaces in the environment and different backgrounds. As young as 9 years old and as old as 93. We have a woman in Kingston, Ontario, who's like a battle axe for First Nations work, and she's 93. She just finished a book, but I won't talk about her right now. But at some point, I'd like to get her in a fireside chat. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
So we're involved in all kinds of projects, that have been happening under the radar, which we haven't even spoken a lot about. Like there's, doctors in Australia and Brazil working on blood cancer research and coming up with some solutions soon to help deal in the medical world. And then there's those that are working on ecosystems under the water, to help restore the coral reef systems in different parts of the world. And there's AI-based technologies, that are being created to help eradicate memory loss and deal with ADHD, and reforestation projects, many of them in Africa, many amazing liaisons that are doing amazing work in these areas as well, and planting trees, of course, to deal with climate crisis. So we're also launching an app to localize SDG challenges, which will be something that everybody can tune into globally and be a part of. So that's something new for the world to look at. So, we also plan to keep organizing yearly events. The first one, which was, with the Dalai Lama, I thought was amazing. And it was kind of a springboard for us to look at other potential events, not always the same, but maybe with the same global reach. Many exciting, wonderful things coming up in 2021. And I don't want to take the entire time away from this this Zoom call, because there's lots of cool things that we can be talking about. But thanks for asking the question, Kiro.
Honestly, I just love the commitment of everyone I get to meet through Umbrella Collective. I think in the documentary screenings, it was one of the liaisons from New Zealand. And our documentary was at 9:30 in the morning here in Canada. His time, it was midnight tomorrow. And he still made his entire screening, and he was engaged and so on. It's so inspiring. Like time zones don't matter anymore at some point, because you're so committed, you're staying engaged in spite of all the different challenges. So I get so inspired when I meet all the people that I get to meet through you again.
And I think you're referring to Robin, who is from New Zealand, is also a Maori, and very interesting guy. He'd be a great guy to have in a Zoom as well.
Absolutely. Kasha, one of the things that struck me when I was listening to your TED Talk is when you mentioned that you were bullied at elementary school because you were wearing reused clothes from thrift stores. And you said that you were very proud of wearing reused clothes because it's better for the environment. But you mentioned that you had your mother had a phone call from one of your professors telling her that you should not talk about these things with the kids, because then you get bullied more. And I think reuse is a very, very important tool in our fight against the waste crisis. And I'm wondering, what advice do you have for children, for mothers, and for teachers on how to fight that stigma that's getting in the way?
So I've always been very proud to shop at thrift stores. I've always been very rooted in my values as a kid, but also like as a girl growing up in a single parent household, we didn't really have many other options. So I had no choice but to, embrace what I had available to me. And when I learned about the positive effects of, being able to kind of divert clothing that might have gone to landfills, I really took it on, and I wanted to share it with my classmates. Like you said, it was a bit stigmatized. I think it's becoming more popular now that people are starting to see the value of, thrift shopping, or repairing what we have, making sure that we don't waste what we have or finding new uses for it. I think that it's really important that, no matter what anybody says, to just stay rooted in your values, because if you care for the earth, it shouldn't matter what other people say. And sometimes it is really hard to carry that stigma, or to feel judged or rejected. But I think when you remember what you care about and what you value, it's hard to not continue taking those valued actions. So for me, when I was growing up, that was thrift shopping, and I still really enjoy thrift shopping. It's also important to consider that even while thrift shopping, you can overconsume. So thinking about overconsumption and reducing consumption in general is also a really important idea to carry forward while we're, looking at the climate crisis and, ways that we can personally have an impact on it. But yeah, I have to reiterate what I said. I think just staying true to your values and, remembering that we have a really big impact on this earth in our individual actions, as well as in our individual actions as well.
Is there any role you see for teachers and through our education system sort of to help the children sort of gain appreciation for these things? Because I think there's a lot to say about leadership by example with kids from one another, sort of like this kind of peer-to-peer education. But there's also like a leadership role from teachers. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I was going to school, we did learn about reduce, reuse, recycle. But in practice, we weren't really taught what that looked like. So maybe recycle your plastics or your cans, but it didn't go beyond that because at the time we didn't have that knowledge. So teachers taking it upon themselves to look at how practically that fits into our lives. So maybe thrift shopping is an option for reducing the waste that we put in landfills, or maybe it's just mending old clothes, teaching kids those skills to be able to implement that practically in their lives, and also being sensitive to I think something that I'm always trying to consider is maybe there's a reason for somebody doing something in their lives. Try not to pass judgment, and try to have compassion, because you never know somebody's story. And I think that it's a big part of the conversation of global citizenship as well. Is going beyond our own frames of reference of our own experiences, and being curious and inquisitive and wanting to know more about a person. And so I think that that's a really important thing for teachers to remember, is that there's more to a student than what's presented in the classroom, and to just be kind.
Yeah, no, I agree. I ask these questions because being a global citizen to me is about cultivating credible empowerment. And this is really why I love One Bear World Collective so much, because I get to learn from so many different people. And I think it's just really important not to confuse that, obviously, with toxic positivity and an accountable virtual self-proclamation or blind optimism. And so through One Bear World, I get to learn a lot from different people, and I get to collaborate with so many different people. And I just see so many different opportunities to really build each other up and lift one another, to be able to multiply the impact of the work each one of us is doing. And Ian, you have done a wonderful job just assembling all these forces of nature together, and you make it seem so effortless. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for people who are working on the ground through communities on how to work together and how to fight the waste and climate crisis.
Thanks for that question, Kiro. And it's also an honor and privilege for me to see all the amazing things that people are doing. And I, without a great team behind me, I mean, they make me look great. But I mean, it's all the hard work they're doing behind the scenes to put all the pieces together. So I really thank my team for that. But in terms of giving us the opportunity globally to see what people are doing, in terms of encouraging people in what they're doing on the ground level, I mean, and thank you, Kasha, for sharing, how important it is for us to have our own set of values and how we live personally. I just want to give a quick example, as a word of encouragement. the home that we're in now, you can see a bit of it in the background. It's 80 to 90% recyclable material, which we were able to get from another home that was being destroyed. And we've, you know, it was an old 1920s schoolhouse. And so we've tried to restore it in such a way that we can bring back some of the charm from the early 20s. But make a long story short, it's you practice what you preach. Composting, of course, is an important thing, and a garden being in the backyard, which can produce some wonderful, you know, fruit and vegetables in season in Canada for us here, is always obviously a treat for us to be a part of. It's little things that we can do. It's encouraging others and what they're doing. And so my encouragement to others is to be the same in your own community, make an impact in your own community, collaborate with others. Collaboration is the key, right? Because for too long, community groups and organizations have been reluctant to work together.
Yeah.
That's what causes a duplication of services and a dilution of the impact. And so One Better World Collective is trying to erase all of that. So just find ways to work together through OBWC. We must persist to foster more collaborations on the local level. And I think that's the key. And so all of you that are listening here that are doing great things in your own community, keep doing it. Others will see and will join you in your work. And if you want to do something locally but don't have a way of collaborating with others, let us know and we'll join you together with people in your own area.
Yeah. No, that's certainly, I can see that in my own work where people are always reaching out to us, asking us how they can volunteer, how can they work with us, and how we can have different projects working together. And it's really about leadership by example, just showing what's possible, and people join calls to action. Once you have a credible call to action, people want to make a difference. Kasha, one of my favorite stories from your documentary is one of Michaela. She's from Africa, and one of the things that she was saying was that she doesn't like to indulge in what other people are doing, and she wants to do something different. And she used an example of teen pregnancy, of how common it is in her own community that other girls look at that and assume that this is the norm and this is just what they should expect from their own lives. I generally believe in leadership by example, and just demonstrating that positive change is possible. So this is my favorite story. I'm wondering, what is your favorite story from your documentary?
That's so hard to choose one. You know, I really connected with young girls who were about my age. There were a couple of them in the film, but one story that one person who it was really great to connect with and learn from was Juma. So Juma lived in South Africa. He had immigrated from Zimbabwe, and at the time that he immigrated to South Africa, there were a lot of xenophobic riots. So people were attacking people who had immigrated to South Africa out of the fear that, you know, they would lose their jobs to them. And so Juma actually had to live in a refugee camp for 4 months. And he started to reflect on the causes of that xenophobic outbreak, and how people had a lack of compassion, or, you know, a lack of togetherness, or a lack of understanding or knowledge for people who had been living in their communities. And so he decided that he wanted to use the skills that he had in arts to empower kids within the community that he was living in, to foster, you know, togetherness, to foster creativity, and opportunities for learning, and, you know, a safe environment where they could come and express themselves. So when I met Juma in 2014, he was the only person working for his organization. And now he employs 11 people. So I was able to travel back to South Africa and meet with Juma and Michaela again, and bring them to the screening that we hosted in South Africa to see how far they've come. And they're both doing such incredible work. And Michaela is now training young women in South Africa to take leadership roles in the sustainable tourism industry. So she's also a leader in her community as well, doing work that centers around sustainability. And women's empowerment. So yeah, I'm very proud of both of them and very inspired by both of them. And, you know, their stories of triumph over adversity and the resilience that it takes to be like leaders in their communities is really just, it's empowering to see. And yeah, I'm just moved by them.
Yeah, me too. It's just beautiful, beautiful stories. Ian, at the beginning of the chat, I asked the audience to reflect on a question, and the question was, what does being a global citizen mean to you? And I encourage people listening to share their thoughts on the chat, and also prepare some questions, because we're going to go to audience Q&A in about 9 minutes or so. Ian, what is your answer to that question? What does it mean? What does being a global citizen mean to you?
Wow, I mean, it means everything. I mean, for One Better World Collective, I mean, what we're trying to do is be all global citizens together, working together as one. And so, and I wrote this down because I didn't want to forget some of the finer points. So, a global citizen is all of us who have a view for things both local and global. And what is our place in these spaces, right? Should we all be active in our community and also work with others internationally to make our planet more peaceful and sustainable? For sure, yes. Global citizenship, I believe, beckons us to examine the systems that keep us apart, that foster inequalities and injustices, and to build within ourselves healthier constructs. We are one family, and we really do need each other. You know, we can't do the stuff we're doing if we try to do it on our own. But if we all do our little bit together, as we heard the Dalai Lama share, you know, we can make a difference. And we are making a difference because we are of that heart to heart that we're doing right now on this particular fireside chat, to bring people in, to encourage everyone that's listening, keep doing what you're doing. Do your small little thing, and together we can become successful. That's what it is to be a global citizen, to put aside your differences, but also, you know, to be humble. I think I've learned that in working with Indigenous people, that, you know, I may have thought of going in and maybe helping out by suggesting things, but I learned over time that you need to gain respect from people. And that means listening.
Yeah.
And then listening. And then listening. And then when you've listened, then I think you've earned the right to share and give some ideas. So that's been a real valuable lesson to me personally, and what it means to be a global citizen. Got to listen, to respect other people and the trials and tribulations they're going through, but also to understand and appreciate the knowledge they have and the culture that they live in. So I don't know, I've kind of gone in different directions with that answer, but it's all part of the global citizen answer.
Well, I mean, one of the things that the Dalai Lama was saying is that we all have the same responsibility, and we all have the same potential to make a small difference. It's impossible to change the entire world on our own, in the same, like, just overnight. It takes the culmination of small action, one on top of the other, to drive systemic change, which is ultimately what's needed, is systemic change within government, within industry, and within policy. But all that takes people demonstrating that they care and actually creating the forces that are needed to drive that systemic change. Kasha, how about you? Same question. What does being a global citizen mean to you?
Well, I have to echo what both you and Ian have said about global citizenship. And I think that global citizenship is incredibly important if we're to solve these existential crises that are at hand. You know, the climate crisis is affecting all of us. And it's not enough to say, okay, like, it's affecting this community first. No, this is our community. We're living as citizens of this earth. And we have a responsibility to that earth and its beings and its people to care for it. Indigenous peoples have always said that we're not, you know, above nature. We are a part of nature. So we need to humble ourselves, as Ian said, and see us as a part of this ecosystem. And I think looking beyond your borders, looking at your community is very important for taking action, of course. But looking beyond your community and seeing that the issues that you're facing in your own community are happening in communities around the world too. We're seeing mirrored situations. We're not and the effects of something that's happening in your community could see itself across the world as well. So learning and being curious again about what the rest of the world is going through at the moment, and how you can be supportive to people in your global community, and learn about other people's cultures and respect other people for their differences, and also find your togetherness and your sameness. So I think that, we all just need to come together and learn from one another. And I think that sums it up for me.
I think it reminded me of a quote of think globally and act locally. I think it boils down to understanding that a lot of the crises that we're facing are global crises, and our local action has an impact in peoples that are not local, that are across the oceans and so on. And just giving that sort of global mindset in our local action and acting within our own community, I think is something that's very important for us to realize. It's not about just having global action. It's really about local action with global mindset of understanding that what we do here affects people in other places. And we talked a little bit about the indigenous the indigenous knowledge came up a couple of times from you and from Kasha as well. And you have worked with over 90 different First Nations and Inuit communities, and I'm wondering if you can share some of the lessons that you have learned and that we can apply in our own work.
Well, I think I touched on that in the last answer. Yes. In terms of really being willing to listen, to the elders in many of these communities, it's been an education for me personally in understanding the deep trauma that many Indigenous people have suffered because of colonialism, because of the residential school systems. There's a lot of stuff in Canada that we're not proud of, and it's our responsibility to figure out ways of bridging reconciliation to many of the hearts of these communities. And so the big takeaway for me in working amongst Indigenous communities, not only learning to listen and appreciate their culture and knowledge, but is to enter into their suffering. And this is something that, I don't say lightly. It's something that took time to appreciate, the struggles, and then to figure out how to be a friend, first of all, and then to, see ways of getting the story to the rest of the country, and then asking oneself, what's the best way of approaching this as a Canadian to be able to be a bridge of reconciliation to these communities. And so it's been a real honor and privilege to work amongst many of these communities, Inuit and First Nations. We had the privilege actually of touring 2 films. One was Indian Horse, which some of you may have seen, which deals with the residential school system, the horror of that, and the trauma that many First Nations kids had to endure. But then also touring the film The Grizzlies, which dealt with the suicide epidemic among Inuit in Kugluktuk, Nunavut, and how they emerged from a very difficult time and became involved in a lacrosse team called the Grizzlies, which, if you can appreciate the Arctic, ice and snow, and having a lacrosse team up in those conditions, it's highly improbable or unlikely they would succeed, but they did. And they actually made it to the national championships in Toronto, and became somewhat successful just by being there and winning a few games. So the honor and privilege of being in these over 90 fly-in remote communities was that we could bring their story to their community to see in action a healing for the trauma by recognizing some of the figures in their own stories, and by traveling with some of the actors from the film and getting to know them as friends. This, to me, was rewarding, because I could see some of the healing happening in the communities as a result of the touring of the films. But also, it gave me a better understanding of how precious our Indigenous people are in our country, and how we should focus more on how we can help them with their own issues in their own communities, not just the trauma, but there's also the water. Many First Nations communities, over 90%, have filthy water. They need clean drinking water. Many of them are stuck in homes, 10 or 15 people at a time. Obviously, there's a housing crisis. And then there's the food. The price of food up there is astronomical. It's ridiculous. So how can we help? I don't know, maybe hydroponically speaking, or other ways of having, opportunities of growing food around the 365 days a year. So many things that I can take away from my work with Indigenous people. But again, an honor and privilege to work with them. And I'm learning something new every day. Just a last quick piece on that. We are involved, as I Love First Peoples, the organization which I helped co-found, and I'm the Director General of today. We are in a sewing machine distribution program now for some northern communities, where some of them only have one sewing machine per school for their kids. And so we've partnered with a company, which I won't use this opportunity to promote them, but we've partnered with a sewing machine company that has donated 60 plus $1,000 sewing machines that will be able to deliver up to northern communities. So a small way of being involved in helping them to work on developing their culture and what's very important to them.
Thank you, Ian. I will let Brittany in right now, who's going to moderate some question from the audience. Hi, Brittany.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. Thank you. This was a wonderful way to start my day, I must say. So we do have one question from Annie. She's wondering what she wants to hear more about the projects you're currently working on, Kasha.
So currently I am working on my second feature documentary, which is called 1.5 Degrees of Peace. So as a Gen Z, of course, we've touched on the anxiety that I personally feel, and I know that this is shared by a lot of my peers when thinking about the climate crisis. But we're also faced with a couple other existential threats. Of course, the pandemic has changed our world, but also the increasing amount of conflict that's going to come because of the climate crisis, and the issue of, militarism and the issue of militarism, conflict, and disarmament are intrinsically linked with the climate crisis. Intersectionality is something that's really important when we're looking at these issues. So I really wanted to highlight how the two are so connected, and how climate justice and peace are critical to one another. So I wanted to use the film to highlight young people who are bridging the gaps between those two issues, intergenerationally and across the issues, to mobilize more people to advocate for peace and climate justice together, and to have a unified movement. Because I believe that, we really can't have sustainable development without peace, and we can't have peace without sustainable development. So this is what I'm really focusing on as somebody who cares about my future and hopes to see peace achieved in my lifetime, and the climate crisis averted. Oops, sorry, this is my cat Luna coming in to say hello for the closing note. But yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. So I'm in the middle of production, making my 2 to 3 minute trailer / demo for the film, which we're going to be using to mobilize more conversations with young people to get them engaged in the issue. And hopefully the film will be released next summer. So, yeah.
Kasha, when it's out, please let us know. We'll be very happy to. I would love to do another screening as a follow up to what we did. Yeah. Ian, where's your cat?
Pardon me?
Where's your cat? Kasha's cat made an appearance.
Oh, my cat is lying in the sun, contemplating maybe jumping in front of the screen too, to kind of, be there with Kasha's cat. But I don't think she's interested right now.
So we do have a lot of great comments in the comment section. They're finding you both very inspiring. Yep, and Zach is saying how to fish rather than giving a fish, very important. I know we talk a lot about mindfulness, and it's such a big word, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate more on like what that looks like. I think global citizenship and mindfulness go hand in hand, but what is mindfulness exactly to you guys? Maybe Ian, do you want to go first? I know that's a big thing for One Better World.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, Jose and I were talking about the whole aspect of mindfulness in action. What does that look like, and how is that different from, say, people that are doing wonderful good deeds without any mindfulness? I think mindfulness is, again, going back to the core of who we are individually. It's understanding inside of us that we have a light that we can shine, that can be a source of encouragement to help facilitate others in the great things that they're doing. It's also being less self-centered and more other-centered. And so being mindful is a reflection of who we are at the core of our humanity, but it's also, figuring out ways to collaborate with others and then come up with solutions that mean more to us as a whole, as one, rather than us individually. And so I think we've been for so many decades so self-centered and so egotistical in a lot of the things that we do. I mean, I remember as a young brash man, I'm going back to the 1800s now. That's how old I am, but
you look great.
Thanks for being hundreds of years old. But back in the early days, my early days, I'll just share this quickly in terms of mindfulness, because it was a challenge I had to put me on the path of being a humanitarian. I was challenged with becoming a humanitarian, but at the same time didn't have any, what I thought didn't have any worth or qualities that I could bring to the world. And so I was walking down a path alone, basically, and wanting to help the environment, and then to organize a humanitarian event. I know Kira's going to smile when he hears this, because here's my chance. I needed a keynote speaker for an event that I was organizing. And, it's like in the back of my mind, why don't you contact Mother Teresa in Calcutta? But then, the doubts will come in and think, you can't do that. I mean, she's not going to, who are you to even think of calling somebody like that? But if you humble yourself and realize that this is not about you, this is about the bigger picture, this is about humanity, then you never know what can happen. So I say this as a word of encouragement to everybody listening who feels that maybe they can't contribute or don't feel that they're important enough. Everybody is important, and everybody can do something. And if you believe in the power of the possibility of doing something, great things can happen. Make a long story short, because we don't have a lot of time. I did call the Missionaries of Charity in Calcutta. They said, Mother Teresa, of course, she's busy. She's trying to stop a war in the Middle East right now. But if you call back a week later, she'll probably be in the office. Call back a week later, and she answered the phone, and it was her. I'm like, my goodness, I'm talking to Mother Teresa. And so she says, well, you're organizing an event. I will pray and, give me a week, call back, and I'll give you my answer. So I waited another week, called back, and she said, the second I began to pray, it's like God said to me, go to Canada, meet Ian, be a part of this event. So from that point in my life, I knew that I took a stand, the fruition of which was an event which mobilized the country. And then I realized it doesn't matter how small or insignificant you think you are. If you have a burden or a passion to do something, move on it. You never know what can happen. And it doesn't always happen that way, but when it does, and it can, it gives you the impetus, momentum to go forward and to do greater things. And so I say that, in terms of being mindful is thinking of the world. What's the purpose that the whole world can benefit from? And then be involved in something that can affect the world. So I had the privilege and opportunity of meeting one of the greatest humanitarians of all time that put me on a path of mindfulness, caring for others ahead of myself. And then here we are today on a wonderful fireside chat that you, Kiro, you yourself doing work to help the environment by dealing with waste. Fantastic. Kasha coming out with a film at 16 years old and now working on a second one. Brittany just finished her master's. And what was the actual in environmental sustainability?
Exactly.
Brittany, kudos, congratulations to you. I know you haven't got your mark back yet, but I'm sure you aced it. They're all confident you have. And so being mindful of everybody in this fireside chat, I care about you guys and what you're doing and want to help you advance what you're doing. And I think if we all have that attitude, I think we'll go far.
Brittany, sorry, I don't mean to put you in a spot, but can you share some of the stats you told us before we went live from your research on, because I understand that your research project was on waste coming out of apartment buildings in Ontario. Am I correct? Or Ottawa?
Ottawa, yeah.
Yes, Ottawa. So what were the main findings?
So yeah, just apartment buildings alone create something like $3 million in societal debt as far as, greenhouse gas emissions and land use, stuff like that. So, but if you send it to a composting facility, we get to recoup those resources. So that was a big finding for me, I guess. You did put me on the spot. I haven't thought about this in a few weeks.
Sorry.
I submitted it and I was like, okay, I need a few.
One of the things that I have been learning from recently is how landfills are being artificially cheap. So the fees that we pay for landfills don't cover the operating cost to run landfills. Speaking of what I just did to Brittany, Kasha, you mentioned in your TED Talk how afraid you are from public speaking, and yet here you are. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you're dealing with things like that?
Sure. I've always had a fear of public speaking. In fact, most of the work that I choose to take on to this date helps me confront my biggest fears on a daily basis. So I think that, taking on something that I've taken on, like this film, or, the media that I choose to create, or, going into workshops, going into schools to facilitate workshops on civic engagement and local action for high school students, it's part of my mission. And, I can't really authentically take on my mission if I'm not, doing the work myself, to, take on what's kind of frightening to me. The scale of the issues are frightening to a lot of us. So that's my own personal resilience journey of learning to overcome some of those fears and continue to take on the work, because it's something that I care about so deeply that I put it out of my mind sometimes when I'm, going on webinars or I'm speaking in public, because, it's really more about the work than it is about me as a person. And it's the only way that I'm able to share the stories of the people that I've encountered in my journey, in the hopes to inspire other people to take action. And that's what I care about most, is, catalyzing others to take change, to make change. So, I try my best every single time, and I show up every single day because I believe in what I'm doing ultimately. So, yeah.
Well, on that note, I think this is a perfect way to end, trying our best and showing up every single time. I think this is really a big takeaway that we should take from today's discussion. I just want to say that I really love the discussion today, and I hope that we can keep this conversation going and do this again in the months to come, and hopefully also we can have more of the liaisons on from One Pair World coming and talking to our community. With that, I really appreciate all your participation today and all the discussion and fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.